are trying to figure something out, the way people think, or the way they think people think, right? So it's all algorithms are really trying to do. Think like people. What would the people that like this type of stuff want more of?
Keep talking.
YouTube pivots towards doing shorts, okay, because they want to emulate what TikTok success is. So long form is good in some cases. Short form is good in some cases. Now I'm not, and actually under a certain time frame, YouTube will make it a short. And they'll make it um they'll make it this way, right? Versus this way.
Vertical versus the
Yeah,
horizontal.
because they thought you did it on your phone, and so it's interesting because like long form content might work in algorithmically and for some things, and then like I said, it's all about the intent of the user, right? So if the intention is to get something quick and quick and dirty, then that's it. But in your case, it's not. It's like I want to learn something, so I'm educating the public, and therefore the education is more related to long form content.
How
Now, not the longer the
confusing.
better. Huh?
How confusing it is for
It is
the
confusing,
individuals.
but it's interesting because I always circle back to the motive of why they're doing it this way, or why the algorithm's picking that up. It has nothing to do. They're not picking things out of random. They think that's what people want. So they're like, well, I got to get ahead of the curve, and people tend to like TikTok, so let me be like TikTok now and have that feature built into the system, and small digestible pieces of content, right? Or what has been working for them too is that long form content, and there's some happy medium, like with podcasts, for example, and the previous podcast that I've been a part of, they would say, hey, I listened to you on the way to work and I listened to you on the way back. So the format was just the right length for them. They could digest one episode the entire day, and it was great because they weren't listening. They weren't, not they were at work. They did their work, but then when they got home, they were listening to us, or they listened to us on the way to work. And so I thought that was really kind of a neat format, and also the fact that they said it that way. I was like, I hadn't thought of that. We're with you when you're not at work. So I think really the social media platforms and the content management systems and not content management systems, content places where you place content, I'm lacking the word for it right now, are trying to figure something out, the way people think, or the way they think people think, right? So it's all algorithms are really trying to do. Think like people. What would the people that like this type of stuff want more of? So depending on your industry, depending on what you're selling, depending on if you're an influencer, right? If you're a big influencer who's just doing some fun stuff, then what kind of content do people that like their stuff do? I've heard from some influencers that sometimes they post one thing and it gets millions of views, other times they don't. And he goes, it gets confusing. He's like, matter of fact, he had more interaction when he had less viewers. There's a guy named Davey 504. He's a bassist. He plays bass. He's a tall Italian guy. You don't know he's really that tall until you see him stand next to other people. And he has 10 million subscribers. 10 million.
Nice.
And he just does. He's funny. He does funny bass videos. He's just kind of like deadpan look, and he makes it fun. But he's really good at the bass, and he has a whole interaction. But he even said one of his more personable posts was that he didn't understand, like, he had more interaction when he had less viewers, less subscribers, and it's just kind of strange, and because they want you to pay for stuff, and it's like there's a whole other set of things that go with that, like, you get the views, but they're not going to show you in front of everybody. They show you the people that really are devoted to you, and then they're going to show those people other pieces of content, so they use if you as a viewer digest everybody as much as possible so they could serve you more ads. That's the way it works.
I know from the various individuals we know who are entrepreneurs or solopreneurs or whatever you would like to call them, that game of figuring out what works, because one person will tell you something, they'll say, like, go to YouTube and post long form on YouTube, and then take that information and then cut it up and put it into these all other platforms. and somebody else will tell you something else. So everyone that's attempting to work on putting themselves out there, because they do have great things to share, are attempting to figure out what platforms, what information would work best for this platform, and it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some of the miscommunication occurs to a lot of individuals, and frustration. Then they go, I'm not touching any of this. I don't. How else? Well, how else do you put yourself out there these days?
Yeah.
When the internet is such a big thing that it does make it easier for you. So I'm kind of asking a lot of questions and frustrations within my questions.
It's a lot of it's rhetorical. These are rhetorical questions. You're not really asking. I can't answer all of that. And if I could, yeah, then I'd run my own social media platform or something. But that's a good point, and I think you're right. This goes back to something we were talking about earlier, where miscommunication happens and why it happens. And because of the world that we live in now, we have multiple formats in which we could display a message, communicate, talk to somebody. So let's just list some of the platforms that we use probably on a daily basis, right? We could call, we could do the internet, what we're doing right now, get online and talk to one another through this internet platform. We could text, we could get on social media and talk to one another, or talk to strangers in some cases. With Twitter, you could talk to total strangers. You could use pictures, you could use videos, you could use text, you could use slideshows, you could use graphics, you could use audio. All of these formats, and could be distributed in different places. Like the amount of places where people could reach me on my phone just alone. There's like 5-6 different things that people, like, I'm looking at text, WhatsApp, the actual calling, Facebook Messenger, Instagram direct, just directly to me, right? Let alone the feeds that we feed ourselves and go into reading all this other stuff. So we're in a very fast-paced and often miscommunication happens because we're not really paying attention to the context of a sentence, and we expect a certain format to be given to us a certain way. So
I'm giggling because just yesterday, I'm talking with my niece, and we're on the phone. She said, I sent you a message. I sent you something. And I'm looking at my message and going, you didn't send me anything. Well, she sent it on a different app. It's like, I'm not in that app. So exactly what you're saying is like, you got to figure out who sent you where, what, and how.
Well, that's all right. So,
and they assume that you got it.
Yeah. Hey, I have people that used to say that. Did you get my Facebook message? No. Was it directed just towards me? No. I thought you would read it because it's in the Facebook feed. No. Hey, I might not have even seen it. So don't get offended, because a lot of times I'm not even on Facebook, or the algorithm didn't show me your post. So sometimes you post something, not everyone's going to see it. And that's step one. Not everyone uses the same platforms you do. And even if they do, they may not get your message within them unless you directly connect to them on it. But as you stated, you might not even check that platform, right? You might have it, but you don't check it that often, or in time for an event, for example. So this is one thing I've told the group that we're part of. I don't answer my phone for a variety of reasons. Unless I know we're going to call and we're going to talk. But there's a variety of reasons why I don't do it. Often it's because it's out of my reach. I'm not even looking at it. Also, it's distracting. So I don't have my notifications on. I don't even know what my ringer sounds like on this new phone that I got. They gave it to me free, and I got a new phone because I was going to need an upgrade. I have no idea what this ringer sounds like. I probably should check it, but I don't know what the default ring when someone calls, because I never have it. I always have it on silent, and that could be construed as me ignoring people or not caring about that. Or what if there's an emergency? Well, if it's an emergency, contact the police. or an ambulance. Do you need me that bad? Then text me. That's the easier way to get a hold of me. I for some reason am more in tune with that, or tell me why you're calling. Leave a voicemail. That's another thing people don't do anymore. Leave a voicemail. Hey, sorry, I want to talk to you about such and such. And people don't do that. They just, hey, call me back. About what? But that's just me, and I'm not dogging on anybody. I think everyone has their own preferred methods, and I know a lot of people would rather talk on the phone, and I totally get it. I understand why. And I used to be that person until my job became to talk on the phone all the time, right? Where I became an SEO person and project manager or director. I'm always talking. So I've developed kind of an aversion to being on the phone all the time. Ironically, not on the computer. I'm totally fine with being on the computer all day.
But it's funny, you just brought up almost like a double-edged sword, as they say, for communicating. If someone leaves messages or they send a communication, some people get annoyed because they're getting too many communications, because the world has gotten so busy that you go, I don't have time to answer all these messages. But going back to the original of you don't even know if someone is getting the message. So you figure out how do you communicate and reach someone. But that double-edged sword is because we are getting so many messages, people are more inclined not to answer them,
right?
Not to respond in a manner that you would like them to, because they have a lot on their plate. And I don't have a complete solution for this for anybody, but except to narrow it down to the people that you talk with and say, communicate with me this way. This is how I'd like to be reached. This is the best way to speak with me or connect with me, because there are so many formats. And how do you avoid that miscommunication? But that's the top level of the miscommunication because of all the different technology stuff that's available.
Right. Yeah.
But then the second level is what comes across those platforms, what you type, and what that person perceives in the emotions of what they received. There's a lot of miscommunications in that.
You're right. The layers that go within that, besides all the noise and the distribution of content, that alone in and of itself is a problem. But once you are communicating, then what's being said, and the format usually dictates how you communicate, right? So with text, you might be a little more succinct. You might use more emojis or abbreviations or whatever. Yeah, exactly. me too now, because they show up randomly. Oh, that's cute. Oh, that's somebody. But that is a lot of the problem too, is that you may not come across the way you need to. Sometimes you don't have urgency when you're communicating something, or you perceive too much urgency and it wasn't as important as it was, or there's a word that you use that person for some reason read the wrong way. And that's happened a lot too, where people are saying certain things over text and I'm like, what do they mean? And generally I try to ask for clarification, because if they're out of character, it's like something's going on or there's something happening, or but not everyone does that. People were like, well, you're being a jerk. I don't even tell you you're being a jerk. I'm just going to be like, whatever. This person's having whatever. I don't care anymore. And people could get upset. Or in some cases, it may not be as personal, but you're not really communicating what you really are all about. Part of the program that both of us really that are launching is about language.
Yes.
And the reason why we focus so heavily on that is because the communication, no matter what tool, method, or whatever it is, the language you use will dictate action from the other person, whether or not how they perceive you. So if you're not using if you're using language that is around the issue but not quite the issue, or not quite what you want them to do, then you may have to change your language and the method in which you communicate, in terms of the words you're using. And we talk about that with self-affirmation and not using, there's certain dirty words in our meetup group, right, in our mastermind, right? There's words you can't use.
Let's clarify dirty words for people.
Yeah, they're not no, they're not like
they're
George
words that are
Carlin,
not good for your mind,
right?
that
Yes.
actually imply things that, like the TRY word.
Yeah.
It implies that you're not capable of doing something, and
Yes.
most people don't understand that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
those are our dirty words.
Yeah, it's a mindset shift. It's not like cussing, right?
Yeah.
To clarify that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, but that did, even when I first joined a couple years ago, like it did put things in perspective. It's like, oh yeah, when you actively stop using those words, you have to find another way to describe that feeling. Because if you just keep saying that one, then you're going to keep doing that one. So it converts your mindset to say, no, say what you mean. My grandma used to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Say what you mean. Like if I said something that was, peripherally around the thing, okay, change what? Oh, the channel. Well, then say the channel. Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, but she'd pull it out of me, and let me make the mistake. But then she go, well, don't assume I know what you're talking about, even though I do know what you're talking about. Right? Because
one of my pet peeves with people not saying what they exactly mean is the use of the F word. And I'm referring to the actual F word in this case, where they use it so often in places like, wait a minute, that's not what you're attempting to say.
right.
But you somehow substitute that word as if it makes up for every form of communication with that one word. It's like, no, that means you didn't work enough to actually apply and imply exactly what you're attempting to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I hear it a ton. It's like,
oh yeah,
wait, hold on. What is it that you're actually saying?
Yeah, I have some friends that are like that you almost can't really, unless you really know them, you don't really know what's really going on in the sentence, because they're just using a lot of euphemisms and the F word and pile of S and a son of a B. Like there's a lot of like that going on. And don't get me wrong, I've gone that direction myself. This being said, I definitely have to clean up my communication when I deal with clients and deal with students that I teach. But also it made me be that way with even the general public and friends. Like communicate what you're really trying to or aiming to convey. Again, just caught myself. Because those words, they have their place in time. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes it makes things funnier, and that's the only reason why I say it actually. But or if I'm angry or something, maybe. But for the most part, like you said, they replace what you really mean by it. And what are you really trying to get out of? What are you aiming to get out of this whole situation, this conversation? Why
I've actually counted one time with a person that they were speaking, and in one sentence they had used that word, I think a total of 7 or 8 times. I'm going, what?
Wow.
Well, it's definitely lost its impact. By
yeah,
the
right.
time you said it so much, like, all right, so what? It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
My toughest word, which is our dirty word, as you call them, is the WANT.
Yeah.
To me, that is the most challenging one. And because it implies a lack of things, replacing it, I find myself, it's so ingrained into the way that we were taught, that replacing it has become my challenge on a daily basis. Like, wait a minute, I just used that word. And I know that it's a word that is not good for my mind. It's not good for my communication process and what we're implying to someone to do. We're not working out of lack. So replacing that, and I catch myself doing that a lot.
That's interesting you say out of lack, because that's where my mindset gets triggered. I really am making an effort to pull myself out of that mentality of scarcity and lack, because I grew up that way. It was hard, and things weren't easy. I'm in a decent place now. I could obviously do certain things better and certain things worse, but I shouldn't speak like that. And I'm gonna be realistic, but I'm not gonna use language that is self-defeating. It came up even today in my hot seat. So just things like that of like, okay, I'm not the overly positive guy. I'm going to be triumphant everywhere I go. That being said, I shouldn't speak from the idea of scarcity. And there's a confidence that comes with that. How you convey yourself and the language you use, people will buy into what you're giving them more when you use language that's positive, confident, and sure. You're sure of yourself. If you're not sure of yourself, then why should I be sure of you? You're not even sure of yourself, right?
And people catch that.
Yeah. Oh,
They
100%. It's like a
immediately
shark in the water.
imply something when you're speaking. You're not paying attention, but they're already making all these decisions about what you just said and who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's I remember I would work with teams, in my job, and we'd have clients that some were nicer than others, let's put it that way. And some clients, when they hear somebody who sounds weak, prey upon them verbally, and I could see it, like almost palpable, like even if it's just on the phone. And I remember one guy who I worked with, he had he was relatively new in the industry, did social media stuff, and yeah, he was like, guys, getting on me all the time. I'm using a different language than he used, but partially because he didn't sound confident. When I spoke, the guy shut up. But I've been doing this for a long time. I remember when I was young in the industry, I had the same problem. I was a little bit more passive than I am now, and I didn't use the same language, right, that I use now, and the same confidence that come through in my communication, verbally or written or whatever. So when there's that, some people are cool about it, they understand, and some people are sharks, and they'll prey upon those things, or the other way around, they get repulsed by it. So they're not going to prey upon it. They're going to be like, well, you don't sound very competent. I'm not sure I should be doing or listening to this person, or I don't really understand what they're trying to tell me, aiming to tell me. And that is an important factor there. It doesn't mean you have to be confident in everything. You have to know everything, but understand that you don't have to know everything. And that's one thing I had to learn the hard way. I don't have to have all the answers. This is a dialogue. And if I don't have answers, I'll get them for you, or we'll work on it, or you get it somewhere else. But don't pretend like I have it and then come across like I do, or I'll try to misdirect you or use a lot of words to fill in the space. That's another thing that I think a lot of people tend to do, is use a lot of language to fill in the central idea. And that's okay if you're going somewhere with it. And that's probably why they're doing it. They're trying to get that thing out. They're like, I got to roll with this because this is turning into a snowball. I'm going to roll it down the hill. But I had to learn also to be more succinct when it calls for it. Right. And that's hard. You don't always have the right answers, and you want to discuss it. And you want to get everything you have out. And often it's not necessary. People use filler language, and like I said, euphemisms, and or they presume that you know what they're getting at. Sorry, my father used to get in that. Like, I don't like when people say, you know what I mean, all the time. You know what I mean? Like, no,
I hear
I
that
don't.
a
Why you
lot.
tell me?
I
Yeah,
hear that a lot.
yeah. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
That great filler.
Yeah. And it's funny when you're like in a joking situation, you're like, you know what I'm saying? Like, because you're not really asking, But people, when they're serious asking, like, you know what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? It's like you haven't conveyed yourself clearly enough if you have to ask that question. Now, I'll ask if you have questions after I do a lecture or something. But I don't care whether or not you heard what I'm saying, because I said it the way I'm supposed to say it. If you don't understand it, you ask the question.
I'm going to fib on myself about what you're just talking about, confidence and all of that. When I'm teaching something and I'm working with the students and the clients, and it's something that I'm really very confident and comfortable in. Usually I don't have any of the words that we said that I'm using that are the dirty words, as we are calling them.
Yeah.
Everything is clear. But as soon as we go into an area that I'm not comfortable in, or I don't have the answers, a lot of those words come up. And the students usually catch me on that. I go,
Yeah.
whoa, you guys are right. You are incredibly correct. I don't know the answer to it. So look at it subconsciously. Immediately those words come up because there is a lack of knowing or a lack of confidence in whatever that particular thing is. And
Yeah.
that's a learning curve for both them and me at the same time.
Yeah.
Just because I'm teaching them or they're learning, we both catch each other in those areas where we go, that's how we tend to miscommunicate in certain ways.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's really, it's tough because everyone has their different methods of doing it. But I do think it's about the language and being succinct and using the right language. And what's helped? I have questions for you actually. What's helped you articulate yourself better? Because it sounds like you went through phases of kind of not saying exactly what you mean or sugarcoating things, or and then you became a lot more confident in what you're saying, but also using language that people understand. So it does take a certain amount of empathy and kind of understanding who you're talking to. But would you say there's other, like, are there methods or people that helped you along the way? Like what was your
Definitely I've done a lot of reading. I've gone through a lot of different programs, but I think what helped me the most is to come back to me within and figure out who I am, so that when I'm communicating, I'm standing strong in the things that I'm saying and that I am portraying. I think that's the biggest thing that helped me put my voice out there and begin to say things the way that I see them, and allowing others to look within themselves and go, is that what you're hearing me say? I was no longer concerned with what I'm saying is going to land incorrectly. I say what I need to say and go, is this what you understood from me? So those are the pieces that I kind of went back in and go, how do I say that? What
yeah
is it that I'm really saying? And what do I intentionally communicate in this process?
yeah
That's the way that I learned to really pay attention to what I'm saying, not being so concerned with what does every word mean and
right
how are you going to understand it. I have no way of knowing what you're going to understand or not
yeah
understand out of my
right
entire speech or whatever I'm teaching. But if I say it and I come back to you and go, Alan, what did you get out of this? Could you communicate back to me what you got, what you understood? And I do that a lot when I'm even sharing a video or I'm sharing something with them, and we're all listening. We'll have, a group, 8 to 12 people, however many people are there. And I listen to their feedback of what they got out of what I said or what I shared with them.
yeah
And that's how I learned that not everybody hears the words exactly the same. And the
yeah
easiest way to understand what they're saying or what they heard is ask them.
yeah right yeah
Ask them,
yeah and they
because
may yeah
you don't know what went through their head.
right right
That's the toughest part, is you don't know what they heard out of what you said.
yeah
But having the feedback, it's like, okay, there we go.
yeah yeah
And then you can correct it.
yeah yeah often with students, I have a variety of students in my classes, and some of them are really savvy and get things right away because they're in the industry and or they've been exposed to a lot of the language that I'm using. And there's some people who have no idea what the heck I'm saying, right? And it's okay because I tell people that. So, look, you don't have to understand everything right now. And so the communication style they get accustomed to, because they know that I'm not just expecting them to understand everything I'm saying. Like, it's okay if you don't know. So let's talk privately if you don't know. I'll give it some time because I'm going to say things and you'll digest it. Don't ask immediately. But that being said, if after the next class you don't understand, then let's get on a private call and I'll walk you through what you need to know. And a lot of times it's they were overthinking something. They looked at something and got caught up in the minute details. And it's very similar to what we're talking about. It's like they looked at the code and what is this? What is this? What is this? And I'm like, don't worry about all that. That's not what we're here to look at. It's just a lot of fluff for all you're concerned. We're just looking at these things. You don't have to know what every single thing means. What does it mean? What are we aiming to get out of this? What's the intent of this communication or this task that we're doing? Then let's figure that out first. If you want to know how to program, take a programming class. You're right. But you don't have to learn it here. This is different. So, and then they go, oh, okay, yeah, and then it clicks in their head at that point. But I think that's a lot of the issue is that people are aiming to evaluate what you're saying and read into it. And that's another thing that bugs me. When people read into things, they read into what I'm saying. I'm like, no, if I wanted to say that, I would have said that. So it's like I don't use language that you have to read into. It's like, no, I'm pretty straightforward about what I mean. I'm not sugarcoating anything. This is what I think, this is what I believe. And if I don't want to say anything, I won't talk. That's it. If I'm not saying anything, it's probably when I worry the most. It's like if you're talking and I'm going,
I'm laughing because I sat next to someone who got a text message and it was just a couple of words. And the scenario they came up with to what that person was saying, I'm looking, I'm going, you got that from these 3 little words that they have in there?
Yeah.
Exactly how did you arrive at that? So yeah, there's a lot of assumptions and miscommunications. Like, I don't read that. I didn't see what you just said.
Yeah.
But they make up a whole scenario about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating, actually. It's like it could be a sociological study where people like, what did you mean by you're welcome? Like, what? I meant you were welcome. That's what I say when everyone says thank you. That's why no, but what are you like? I've had people do that to me, and I'm like, I have no idea where you're coming from right now. This is not about me. This is about what you're going through. And I've had to, set people straight with that, because it's like I didn't say anything derogatory or mean, and I'm pretty careful and good about those things. And 99% of the people that I run into would say the same thing about me. You seem to have a problem with something. It may not be me. Right. So, and if it is, let me know. What did I do? Not what did I say just now? From your welcome, you deduced this, so silly.
The other one that gets me in the miscommunication part is when they're not paying attention.
Yeah.
They're distracted by their phone or by whatever.
Yeah.
And then they jump into the conversations like, wait, where did that come from? We talked about that like 20 minutes ago, or that's not even the topic we're speaking of. But they get so distracted. So they end up miscommunication. And a lot of times they end up being embarrassed by it instead of saying, I appreciate your understanding. I must have not paid attention and missed a part of what was said. But that's a lot of miscommunication there.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to business or couples, where it can actually, sometimes I've seen it go into arguments like, wait, back up.
Yeah.
You simply missed something.
You missed something.
What you just said.
Right.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
But ask.
Yeah. Don't assume it. Yeah, exactly. Just ask. It's okay. Or maybe you didn't hear me, or maybe you misunderstood the word I used to describe that one thing. I get that sometimes, where certain people not so much misinterpret what I'm saying, but assume that I remembered something they said a few months ago. And it's like, I would be honest with you, my memory is not great when it comes to these minute details. I told you about this scenario 2 months ago. Okay. I don't know. Like I remember the idea behind why you're saying what you're saying right now. I remember all that stuff, but the situation, how it led up to that, and the fact that you were talking to so-and-so on the September 20th, I don't know. That detail went out of my head. I had to fill it up with something else. And if it was really that important, I apologize that I did not pay attention to that. I didn't realize that was the highlight of the thing I need to learn. But sometimes people just presume that you retain all the information that you've heard over time. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I don't. I'm not trying to be rude here, but let's break it down here. You know, I deal with a million people a day. You know, like, can we get to the point of why you're saying this?
It goes back to, again, they're either over communicating or
Yeah.
under communicating, or they communicate and you don't even get the message that they were communicating with
Yeah.
you.
Oh,
And they
oh
expect
my
you to
God.
remember.
Yeah. If I were to give a lesson to business owners that are in highly specialized fields, holy cow, their websites sound, I mean, it's just like, ugh, I don't want to read all that. Like, why do I need you? Just get to that point and then I'll read all that. But they start off with all the stuff that they can do and all the language, and they fill pages upon pages with jargon. And it's like we don't live in a world where that's, you know, like that people can sift through that. We need to communicate what we need from people and what you need from me. So I'm not saying you shouldn't have that, but holy, like the amount of companies that do that, like I'm like, I don't care anymore.
I
You
see
know,
that
like,
a lot in sales pages
yeah,
where it goes on and on and on. It's like, wait, why can't you
yeah,
simply get to the point? Because
yeah,
people are intelligent enough that if you communicate it properly, they're going to get it. You don't
right,
need, 100 pages to communicate your
yeah,
idea.
right, yeah. And if you need that much, I don't want to work with it. Now, if you have it for the people that want more, that's great, and that's good SEO to a certain extent as well. But if you don't start off with, you don't lead to, hey, here's how we can help each other, right? And you're just going on and on about you're the best this, and you have the great services, and then you're losing me.
I
The
don't
more,
read through all of that. I'm
neither
one
do
of the
I.
people that is like, okay,
Yeah,
if you can't communicate within the first few lines
yeah,
and be accurate in what you're attempting to communicate, I'm not very likely going to read the rest of
yeah,
it, whether you have 2 pages or 20 pages. It
yeah.
doesn't matter.
Right, exactly. And the that it happens a lot with software companies. I notice, like they just explain and they use all the language that revolves around what they do, with how well they do X or what they do with Y, etc. But then it's like, yeah, you're just losing me. I don't. Why do I need it? You know, why do
It's
I care?
fluff. It
It's
feels like
fluff.
fluff.
Yeah, it's a lot of fluff, a lot of jargon.
Hmm.
And then there's some people who are really good about communicating an idea. Like there's a soap company called Dr. Squatch. It's geared towards men. It's just a block of soap, and it has a scent. It's just soap. But they're really good about communicating the idea that, hey, you're a man, you need this. And then they have funny commercials and they have very succinct advertising. And it's like, you need this, like,
Now I got to look it up. I've never heard of it.
yeah. Or Manscaped is another one that's geared towards men, and it's about shaving your private area. It's a public company. And I was baffled and blown away because I know people that work there.
Uh-huh.
But I was blown away of how much they're able to saturate the market where no one else was, and just the way they communicate.
Mm.
Really good, succinct, to the point. Sometimes it's funny. They know their audience, and they're even people who don't do that now thinking maybe I should do that. You know, they're getting to people to kind of, because of the language they use, the communication style, all that stuff makes people interested in doing that. Or if there's a new food you haven't tried, a new restaurant, and they have a good advertising campaign, I'll try that. I've had that food before, but they're selling it, and I want to try it from them, right? So I think it's really good to have to do it like what we do with our exercises is get that language that other people are using to describe what you do, and then bake that into your messaging, because that's what people react to. Not all the jargon, not what your peers do. I think that's the other problem, is that they use language that their peers do, whether they're personal, right? Like
Hmm.
the person in their life uses that language, like the bunch of f bombs. They grew up in, you know, New York or something. They just in Boston where I'm from. Or kind of where I'm from. There's a lot of swearing. So you're with your friends, you just do that. And they think that is what you do with all your friends. No, that's just your group of friends when you're in that little circle. When you come outside of that circle and you come to the world here, people don't respond very well to that. You know,
Although
and
I have seen some high individuals, I'm saying high, that they have a tremendous amount of following and they have
Yeah.
a gigantic business, and that is part of their normal language.
Yeah.
Which that's a change in our communication from years back.
Sure.
You would not have heard those things. Now it's like, okay, you hear it and almost as if it's nothing.
Right.
But it is surprising to see the change in how communication styles have become. But you hit on something earlier with the companies that are targeting men, that their messaging is very succinct, short, and almost comedic.
Yeah.
Because we tend to think that, it's awful to say that, but men have a short attention span.
Yeah.
But the truth is, everyone right now, and that's a horrible way to say it, everyone, most individuals have a very short attention span. So
agree.
when people don't communicate precisely and they end up miscommunicating, or they end up over communicating.
Yeah.
And that is one of the miscommunication, is over communicating.
Yeah.
You lose that individual. They're no longer listening to you.
Right. Yeah. I agree. And it's interesting you say that, because it's like, it's not just a men thing, it's a human thing, or at least our societal thing.
Yes.
And especially nowadays, because we're too busy with busy. The minute we find open time, we fill it up with stuff. And then so it becomes saturated. Every minute of the day has some purpose, something you have to get done, or something you have to pay attention to, something to look at, something to read, something to digest, something to listen to. And no one's just sitting at peace, just pondering life and daydreaming. Do more of that, but just give kids time to do that. That was the whole George Carlin. He had a bit about that. Like, yes, you just sit there and daydream. You should be required to do that for an hour. Just sit there and think about things, look at the sky or whatever. But because of that fast-paced, busy lifestyle, we have to learn what works and what we need to communicate. And there was a point I was gonna make it, and I can't. I'm trying to pull it back in my head, but I deal with this a lot with clients. For one, I deal a lot with students, and when people are like, I guess it's the presumption that you understand is what bothers me most about that, is presuming that I get everything you're trying to say or aiming to say, and I should just go with you because you're saying all these words. And it's really about the feeling behind it. What is your intention behind it? The words. Words are just there to outwardly reflect what it is we're feeling or thinking, or both. And if you can't communicate that, then you're not being your authentic self. Rima.
You hit on exactly what I was thinking. But when I share a lot with the students, like, authentic communication wins all the time.
Yeah.
Which comes back to being succinct and being on target with how you're feeling and what you're thinking, instead of adding in a whole bunch of jargon. So yes, back to the authentic self.
It's authentic. and there is a bit of a shadow self that certain people have. I think in a lot of ways people communicate. I had a conversation with one of our mutual friends that's in our group, and there's a person that they used to work with that was very pushy. Yeah, and I knew the same person, and that turns me off immediately when people are pushing. And I met this person a couple times, but it's like that to me is an immediate turn off. I don't mind being pushed by people that I care about and nudged in a certain direction, but like you said, it's the word pushy versus the word nudge, or the coaxing, or hey, let's do this, versus I barely met you and you're already pushy. And some people respond to that, and they need to hear that language. Going back to what you were saying about, that's what I was going back to. People that are in high positions that use that kind of rough language. I think there was a novel for a minute. Well, this guy makes millions of dollars, but he uses language like we do, kind of, right? But that gets old. What are you saying? And are you saying the same thing over and over again? But you're just saying it louder and faster and more F words. associated with it. That's where you start losing people, in my opinion. Now, granted, that's, that they have their methods of doing things, and certain people have risen very well by being authentic. And that's where we have to choose. What does authentic mean to them? Does it mean saying those words or communicating what they want to communicate, which they do both? The problem is there's people that will take authenticity as a shield and not really be authentic, right? They're using the words.
Totally accurate.
They're mimicking what they've learned from these people, and they're like, I can say the same thing, and I'll be the same person, and they're not that person, and it becomes not themselves. They're just using it as a. They almost become a parrot. If you
have you ever thrown at someone the challenge to go, okay, repeat what you just said without the F word? Say it without it. You will see their eyes like roll back of their head. It's like, what? How can I say? It's like, yes, there are words that are going to say exactly what you need to say. You're just not utilizing them.
Yeah.
You're choosing to substitute this word for what you really mean.
Yeah.
It's fun to do that, especially with someone that you know, not just anyone, someone that you know. Go, okay, stop.
No, that's a good point. I may not call someone out immediately if I don't know them very well. But that is a good exercise when people are doing that, to say, hey, can you repeat that? But like you were saying it to a group of nuns or something.
It doesn't have to go all the way to nuns.
Yeah, I know. I would exaggerate totally. But that is interesting. I was thinking about, like, who could I do that to now?
Don't say Rima set me up.
No, you don't. No, you don't. I don't even think I've ever heard you swear. It's not in your vocabulary. You just don't really use words like that.
Because there's always ways to communicate what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, I refrain from it, but I am not above it. I'll use it when I'm usually with people that I know and I'm friendly with, and it's more to emphasize something being funny. And even then, I might not use it, but
I find it humorous, actually, especially with a couple of friends that I know through the mutual group that we have.
Yeah,
that is their mode of operating. That's how they speak, and they know that because I don't use that word. They go, okay, Rima, excuse me, but I find it funny at the same time because it's so stuck in their mind.
Yeah,
that it's become a pattern of using it, and I think that's one of the challenges in miscommunicating, because whenever a pattern takes over, you're not fully being present and aware of how you're sounding, what you're coming out with, what are you portraying in the words that you're saying. And we had a guest that was talking about patterns. When patterns collide with will, patterns will win.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening, is it's become a pattern to speak that way.
Yeah.
So now when you challenge them, it's like, oh.
Yeah. I'm out of my comfort zone now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. In that comes from not just curse words, but also soft language, euphemisms, not really saying what you
know
mean.
What I mean.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Exactly. 100% right there. Yeah. Or filling up space, not just being comfortable with silence, and, having to say something. It's like, I don't have to say anything.
That is so uncomfortable for so many people.
Yeah.
For the silence in a business situation or a personal situation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's a great learning to go, why are you comfortable?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are you uncomfortable with that?
Yeah. It's interesting.
I ask a lot of questions. That's how I learn.
Well, that's probably one of your best traits, is that you ask questions when you don't understand.
I think that's why the podcast is so fun for me, because I can ask the questions.
Yeah. Like, well, why did you do this? Or how did that happen for you? Or what was it that motivated you here? And you get these answers, and the people become a lot more authentic because you're paying attention to them. And whereas And on the flip side of that communication issue, maybe the other people don't pay attention to them in the same way. So when they speak what they feel, they get demotivated by people just whatever, kind of dismissing them. I've seen that happen. It's like, well, whatever, and yeah, maybe that person could have said something more fervently or used a different word or built a business plan out of it or something, whatever it is that they had to do, but you didn't hear them. You only were only concerned with what you wanted to hear, and you heard, you listened, you heard but didn't listen. You heard words, but you didn't focus on what they were talking about. So then that person becomes less motivated to talk to you. So if you ask questions or like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, not in a mad way, like, oh, what does that mean? Or how did that happen? Or what was this? What motivated you for that? Then they get to what they really mean. And then you could guide them into using that language. But unfortunately, not everyone has, a motivator like you, Rima. But I think that also is a problem with the receiving end, because people who maybe are shy or grew up a certain way or New Yorker rough. I use New York as an example. Obviously, it's not it's almost stereotypical thing. Who swears a lot or whatever. They weren't communicated to in a certain way, and their inner world responds to a certain way, but their outer world, they just didn't get the response. So they have to be gruff or they have to be sugarcoating, and they can't speak what's in their heart because it leaves them vulnerable, and then they get hurt. And that happens a lot too. So they have to, and then those are the ones who usually read into everyone else's crap. Right? The ones who are the most vulnerable, they're like, they have to read it. What do they mean by that? Nothing. They didn't mean, and matter of fact, just assume they just meant what they were saying. Even if they did mean something else, let them figure it out. Don't worry about it.
Don't attempt to assume what they were thinking or what they were saying. I think that's why I love part of your program where you actually take a person through a series of words and have people have input, or even themselves put the input of what that word means. And you find that you get so many versions out of one word. It's like, wow. Look what one word could mean to all these individuals. I love every time you do that.
Thank you. And it's a lot of fun to do it with a slight group of people, like a small group of people, like in a classroom setting or in our mastermind or whatever it is, because you get so many different perspectives on that word. You get some people think of it one way, and another person looks at it this way, or this reminds them of something else, and they pull that all in, and people, oh, I hadn't thought of that. And that could be used for marketing or communication or just communicating on social media, whatever it is, or targeting a certain type of person. Because I hadn't thought about this group of people. I think I mentioned this before. We had a student that had men's wallets, and we did the exercise similar to that, but he didn't focus on women with his product because they were men geared towards men. But the problem with that is that we said, well, what about the people who buy the product? And he said, actually, you're right. There are women that buy it. I was like, yeah, they're buying it for their dad or for their uncle or for their boyfriend or, whatever it is. So there's a whole subset of places that you could go to. Like I told him, Pinterest, you could post pictures, get unique gifts for your husband, right? And put that in the boards like that. And he's, I didn't think about that. Because he was just stuck in his world and his peripheral, and the people that are around him. Yeah, these are men's wallets, and men want them, and I give them to my friends that are men. But when we started thinking about the language and what it means, and what does men mean to you? I don't know, boyfriend, uncle. Okay, and who's related to the boyfriend, the girlfriend? Who's related to the dad, the mom? Or the daughter, or whatever it is. So, like, this just different things that come out once you really delve into the language.
I'm going to fib on myself. Earlier today, I had a conversation with a mutual friend. And he was stuck in his world in what he was saying and asked me what I heard. Whatever he thought he was saying, I was not hearing it. So I pretty much said, you need to call Alan immediately and set up a time and go through this process of analyzing the words and come up and, bring us along so we can actually pitch some of what we hear in the words that you think you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest miscommunication, honestly, is you think you're saying something and the person is hearing something completely different. So
Right.
when you take them through the process, I don't know how many people I've said, okay, you got to call Alan. I don't know what you need to call Alan and set up the time and go through this process with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to you to begin doing that process and sharing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they
that
see
is
it on LinkedIn, seeing it on YouTube, seeing it on different things so that people understand what we're saying, that when you think you're communicating, but you're really miscommunicating. And
right.
that is the biggest challenge for people
Yeah.
when it comes to their business or personal lives.
Yeah. For sure. Oh, yeah, for sure. And it does translate. And the thing people forget about businesses, and I've read this somewhere on LinkedIn somewhere, but there's like, you're dealing with people. You know, even when you're dealing with businesses, you're still dealing with people. So how you communicate, what you're conveying is still important, even if it is a business setting, because you're still talking to a person 9 times out of 10. Right.
Correct.
I mean, there might be a bot somewhere, but even then, they has to go to a person eventually that has to make a decision. So you definitely have to remember that. And, you know, especially now, because if you just use a bunch of jargon and false language, then people tune out. When you deal with them as a person, you talk to the CEO, you talk to the person you want to communicate with. They're a human too, so appeal to their humanity as well. And then you have a better shot at getting them to listen to everything else.
Yeah. I think that is so crucial that you're saying it, Alan, because so many individuals I see that have companies, have businesses, and they forget that their entire communication is going to land on another human being,
right,
with a full-fledged lives that has whatever things going on in their lives. And if they're not communicating properly, then they're wasting their time because they're ending up miscommunicating. But that is another individual, no matter what it is that you're doing. Some of the companies I used to work with, that was what the biggest challenge, because some of the businesses, like, it's a numbers game. As you deal with people, it's like, I don't care if it's a numbers game. The numbers that you're talking about are human beings.
Right.
With a complete life. They have feelings, they have souls, they have everything. So when we begin to communicate better, knowing the language that they understand, you don't end up with as many issues. And I don't think you end up with as many people that feel hurt with the miscommunication. And I think that's a nice way to allow this to end, and let our listeners listen and really think about this.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead and go home and digest it and think about these things. Yeah.
We definitely can go through all forms of what communication and miscommunication can be. What do you got? Last words for them? Anything to think about?
No, one thing I learned was to pay attention to how I was saying things, slow down in my speech, and communicate how you want to be communicated to. And because if you don't like the way people say certain things, then don't communicate that way. And I had to really evaluate. Really, introspection came with me looking outside and putting myself in their shoes, and then going, okay, do I like that when people talk to me that way? No. Then why should I be that way? You know. So therefore, know your audience, and then also develop a communication style where you're to me, being succinct, but also read a lot to get a good vocabulary, so that you can use words to trade for the other words, or rather, so you don't run out of words, or you have to keep going back to the same thing over and over again. So that way it engages your audience better, and people tend to listen to you a little bit more.
The one thing about reading and learning a lot of words, don't intentionally use words that people have to look up in a dictionary to understand what the heck you're saying.
Yeah, I have friends that do that too. It's like, what? Like, know your audience. And again, the jargon thing, it's like the like euphemisms. I don't like that either. So like, you're absolutely right. The vocabulary doesn't mean you have to use the biggest, longest word that has the most Latin roots to it. You just use the words that make the most sense for the situation. and often it may not be what you're used to. And beware of words that cushion things too much or are too blunt. There's somewhere in the middle where people can understand what you mean, you get your point across, and yet you're not coming from a place of anger or judging them. You're saying, look, I just want to know and I want to communicate this for you. So then that turns into a positive experience for you in the long run.
Thank you, Alan. We
Thank
love
you.
hearing from you guys. Please give us your feedback, whatever came up for you as we went through this conversation, and catch us on our next episode. Thank you so much for being with us. We definitely love hearing from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rima.
Thank you.